So thank you all for joining this audio described virtual docent talk. As I said, we've invited our docent and storyteller community to observe and learn together with our brave docent, Lydia Zane, who has worked really hard on adapting a talk that she gave for our Takeout Tuesday. We have a weekly docent talk called Takeout Tuesdays that you all are certainly welcome to attend. They are not describing the visuals. The assumption is that people can see them. And so we will be thinking about learning from this to see if we can incorporate more visual description into those talks. But of course, you're welcome to attend those. And so she adapted one of those with audio descriptions. And, I think this is the first time Lydia's doing this, and she's been very game to open it up to all of us to observe and watch her brave efforts. And I think she really worked hard to incorporate a lot of what I've been sharing about what we've been learning from our friends in the blind and visually impaired community. So today's format, we're in a meeting. We can see, if your camera's on, we can see you. We invite you to be unmuted or to unmute yourself. There will be moments where Lydia invites you to talk or say something. So if you can unmute yourself, please do that. And if we do get some disruption, inadvertent, it usually is accidental, we might mute you. So apologies in advance if we have to do that. So those are all my housekeeping remarks. Oh, and I want to put my telephone number in the chat. If you have any issues during this program today, 7695. So that's my cell phone number. You're welcome to text or call me if you have anything come up that you're struggling to get back on or something, okay? So now I'd like to invite Lydia Zane. Her talk is Being There, Nature in Edo Period Japan. Lydia, do you want to take it away?
Thank you, Deb, and thank you so much for being officially called fabulous, which I absolutely love. Anyway, hello everyone. My name is Lydia Zane. I'm a docent at the Asian Art Museum. And today we'll be taking a virtual step into the museum's Japan gallery, located on the second floor on the east side of the building. Gallery numbers 28 and 29 contain a few objects that I've chosen as representations of Edo period Japan painting, calligraphy, and poetry. I'll be showing slides of the gallery and the objects during the tour. So before we get started, let me introduce myself to you. I am a senior citizen, an art history enthusiast, and a lover of Asian art. I identify as Asian, as American Asian Pacific Islander, with a bit of European in the mix. My pronouns are her and she, but I would prefer to be called by my name, Lydia. Now I'd like to know a little bit about you. Has anyone in this group been to Japan? All those who have, please say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So how many
Yes.
does that?
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Okay. I just wanted to know if anyone in the group has been to Japan. And
Yes.
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 yeah. So quite a
Yes.
few of you.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. For those who wish to briefly share their impressions or experiences, I'd like to know a little bit about your experience in Japan. Would you be willing to share briefly your impressions of Japan? Maybe Deb can call on you to make it easier.
I see Gail's hand up.
The last time I was in Japan, I was there at the peak season of cherry blossom time. And we had a hotel room that looked down on a park, and the park was absolutely pink from the blossoms, and every morning around 6:30, men and women in business suits would come and lay down tarps, and sort of like I grew up at the beach, and people would go early in the morning and put down their towels and then come back later. And so what they did was they came back later after work, and they shared bento boxes and had a meal. So it was like participating in that, and it was absolutely glorious. It was like walking in a pink cloud for days.
What a
Wonderful.
beautiful impression.
You are.
Anyone
Stanley?
else?
Stanley?
I've been there when I could see and when I couldn't see anything. And I loved it. I loved the food. And I've been there for, seeing the fall colors, not the cherry blossoms. And I love the simplicity of when I could see of the modern architecture, but also, excuse me, of older architecture, the temples. It's not gaudy in colors and things like that I sort of remember from China. So I love it, and I love the food.
And this is Victor. I lived there for a year near Kyoto, and we've been there at least 7 times together since then. And we're watching you now on a network named Nanzenji.
Oh,
Well,
well, it sounds like you all have had some very immersive and really fantastic experiences and impressions of Japan. I was there briefly, and I want to go back again. So it gives me great pleasure just to explore a few things, have this opportunity to explore some things with you. Let me see. So starting out, we'll go with the first slide. The first slide that you'll see, whoops, I think I'm supposed to share the screen right now, and I don't have that ability to do it. So Paris, maybe you can help me.
I think that we just need to make you a co-host, and then it should be.
yeah. Let me
Okay.
find you on the list of people.
It'll just take a second.
Okay, thank
I
you.
could do that too, actually.
There you go. You should be
All
able to
right.
share screen now.
Oh, there, I see it now. All right. Just bear with me a moment, folks. Let me see. Here we are. Okay. So here we are.
Looks good, Lydia.
Thank you, thank you. The first slide that I'm showing you is a photograph of the surface of water. It is a deep blue with cool tones suggesting depth and expanse. The water is calm with some rippling on the surface. I wanted to start the tour with this image because it reminds me that Japan is an island country with very close ties to nature. And with this in mind, we're going to be entering, imagine we're in the museum. We'll enter the gallery from the east side of the museum, traveling up escalators to the 2nd floor and pushing through heavy glass double doors on the right. And I know for myself, we've shared impressions we've had of Japan. And for me, entering the Japan galleries has always given me the impression, the subtle smell of bamboo, wood, and tea. This next slide shows the gallery to the right that we would see when we enter. There is a startling impression of light from the south wall. It's gallery 28, and the space is open, with large display spaces on the north, west, east, and south walls. A glass display case containing ceramics stands between the north and south walls on an otherwise open expanse of floor. In the foreground on the south wall are two large painted screens which dominate the gallery. The screens each contain large areas of gold color surrounding river scenes. How am I doing so far, everybody? Can you hear me okay? Are you able to follow?
Yeah, very good.
Okay, thank you. I'll check in
Excellent.
periodically, so thank you. All right, in our next slide, we're going to be looking at the first screen, which is actually painted by a 20th century painter. I know that this tour is dealing with images from Edo period Japan, but if you stick with me, we'll see the thread as to why I'm including this work. It is a slide of a screen painting called Water Landscape by the early 20th century artist Okochi Yako. Name is spelled OkochiYako. And his years of existence are 1893 to 1957. The screen is made from wood, fabric, with ink and colors on paper. It is multi-paneled and it's very large, about 5'8" in height and 12 feet long. There are all 6 panels of this screen are displayed side by side, revealing a painting of a rushing current of water crashing against rocks and then swiftly flowing on. Soft, cool tones of green and blue define the river bank. Bold lines and delicate washes of color indicate the crests and wavelets of rushing water. The upper portion of the screen painting has soft cloud-like areas of gold. In the lower portion, or the foreground, is a green embankment. Could you imagine yourself in such an environment? The artist was interested in the painting style of 18th century Japan, associated with cultivated scholars and intellectuals. This was referred to as literati painting or nanga painting. That's spelled Nanga. For my purposes, I'll be probably using the term literati. The goal of the painter lay in capturing the very essence of his subject. Brush and ink were used with bold brushwork strokes to evoke the painter's resonance with his natural presence in the world, or with his presence in the natural world. Now that I've introduced you to literary painting style, let's consider our next object, also a painted screen, but this time from 18th century Japan. The next slide is of a pair of folded screens with painted panels of dark ink and gold on paper. It is entitled Pine, Bamboo, and Plum, painted by the artist Maruyama Okyo. That's spelled Maruyama, then Okyo. His years were 1733 to 1795. So he was definitely in the middle of the 18th century, definitely in the midst of Edo period in Japan. The measurement of each screen is approximately 5 by 5 by 11 feet. The painting across both screens is of tree trunks and branches over a stream. The twisting trunk of a tree dominates the right side of the screen, with leafless branches reaching out towards branches painted on the left side of the screen. The brush strokes are bold and angular. The branches painted across the left screen end in an upright trunk shown with both bold and delicate brush strokes. Bands of gold are painted across the background. The artist, Maruyama Okyo, rose from humble beginnings to great renown during Edo period Japan. He was known as a realistic painter of natural forms. The subject of his painting, pine, bamboo, and plum, were cultural symbols valued by the literati. They stood for perseverance through difficult times. So I just want to take another moment here and ask if anyone has any questions about what we've seen so far.
And if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, or I'm sort of scanning the audience to see if any of you have your hands up. There is a question in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, well, in the first panels you described, there were the greens and the blues and the gold. What color is or what is it, grays and whites that represent the water crashing against the rocks, or what are the colors of the water? And I assume this is that kind of brush stroke thing, different ink is what I'm trying to come up with.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. The water is depicted in both bold and vigorous brush strokes of blue and lighter blue. The rocks have a gold yellow color, but also the way the water is, there are also fields of white or a sort of off-white that define the movement of the water itself. I'm glad you asked that question, because I had been trying to figure out if the white portion of the water is actually unpainted surface of the paper. And I believe that it is. So the
Lydia, while you're talking about that, do you mind going back a slide?
Oh, not
Thank
at
you.
all. Yes, of course, that makes perfect sense.
Thank you.
So one can see in the fields of color that it moves through various tones of blue. In some, there's a cascade in one part to indicate depth. There's a deeper shade of blue. There's white. And I believe that the white part is actually unpainted paper. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and then moving ahead to the second two panels that you talked about, I was going to ask the color, or ask you the question, what is the color of the paper? Is it actually white, or is it like off, like old looking kind of tan or brownish paper?
Well, that's an excellent question. It actually is a, to my eye, and looking also here at the slide, it is a cream colored, not a super bright white, but something less than that. A shade of whiteness that is more calming, has a more calming effect, closer to the gold, but much lighter than the gold.
And when you say gold, you mean it's actually like gold gilt, or is it like ochre paint, that sort of yellowy paint?
It is actually gold paint. It's a diluted gold paint. I looked into that to double check because I thought perhaps it was a yellow ochre, but the descriptions that I've seen did mention that there was gold in there. It's possible that it could be a mixture. But I
That's-
don't know
yeah.
specifically what the ratio would be.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh,
And
well, thank you for
Lydia?
your question.
Lydia, in the chat, one person wants clarification. What we're seeing are 4 panels, but I think it's just the way Zoom has, or way PowerPoint has cropped your images. So it's
Yes.
hard to have in a PowerPoint slide 2 side-by-side 6-panel screen paintings because they're so horizontal. So what you're seeing are 4 of the 6 screens. Is that correct, Lydia?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. And I was going to mention that. But yes, it's true. I was, for some reason, unable to fit all the panels into one slide. So that will be something that you can look forward to fleshing out when you do have an opportunity to visit the museum. Are there
And
any more?
there's a question, could you remind us when the Edo period occurred?
Yes, the Edo period was from approximately 1610 to about 1868. It was one of the it's noted as being one of the more stable periods during Japan's history of government. And during that time, there was a very very interesting distribution of power, which can be a whole other talk. But basically, you have the rise of the military or samurai class, the great military leaders like Hideyoshi established a shogunate, and the shogunate actually was a great influence during this period in Japan. And so that's why we refer to it as the samurai period, or Edo. Edo. And as you know, Edo nowadays, we refer to it as Tokyo, but in those days called Edo. It's a very interesting history, and I really encourage you to pursue that, but it's quite complicated. And these visuals we're looking at today are interesting because they are seeking to establish a kind of identity in the backdrop of all this government and war and so forth, and a rise in the different classes in Japan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was just one comment from Marissa saying that she sees the light color, the white paper, being a cross between cream and ivory. But yeah, that's it in the chat.
thank you. All right, so thank you for all your questions. So let me see. So we've spent time now with two of the gallery's largest objects. Now we're going to turn to one of its smallest. On screen now is a slide showing the west side of Gallery 29, which runs along the south wall. Two glass enclosed display cases are shown. The case on the west wall contains small lacquer boxes and pouch containers. Next to it on the south wall is a glass case filled with over 100 finger-sized carved objects known as netsuke. So netsuke is a decorative toggle used to secure small containers of personal items to the sash of a man's kimono. They're relatively small in size, no larger than a man's thumb. Netsuke were a standard feature of men's attire during the 17th to 19th century in Edo period Japan. On screen now is a simple line drawing diagram showing how netsuke were traditionally worn. There's a line drawing of a kimono. It is shown draped over a body and tied with a sash or obi. A series of fitted boxes, no larger than the hand, is held by cords or himo. The cords are drawn through the netsuke and then drawn through a smaller bead called ojime. The cords run down the sides of the box and are tied at the bottom. The box or inro, that's spelled I-N-R-O, is secured to the sash or obi by pulling it up between the kimono and the sash and anchoring it using the netsuke. So does everyone have a pretty good idea of how the netsuke was used in men's attire? All right, I hear silence, so I'm going to move on. All right, so let me get my bearings here. In our next slide, we are looking at a series of tools. There's about 17 of them pictured here, but of course, this is just a small sample of the kind of tools that was used by master netsuke makers. Generally, they would make as many as 100 different types of tools to help them help them carve these beautiful images. Netsuke themselves, the material is usually horn or ivory, or nowadays is wood. Sometimes antlers, animal antlers, but most generally wood in modern times. Master netsuke makers used many finely crafted tools to create these masterpieces in miniature. The process is delicate, requiring a steady hand, a fine touch, and patience to carefully carve, polish, and rub the surfaces of the material. It was important to have a smooth surface to avoid snagging the fabric of sash and kimono. In this slide, we can see that the handles of these tools are made from wood. The wood handles are shaped to comfortably fit the hand of the carver, and each tool has a metal tip or bit specifically designed to achieve precision carving. Some of the tips are have ridges on them, like a file in miniature. Others have tips that are perhaps as fine as the edge of a very fine pen or finely sharpened pencil. Has anyone in this group ever done carving or carve?
I'm just scanning to see.
This is Paris from the Asian Art Museum.
Yes.
I'm a printmaker and I do relief prints, and these really remind me of my carving tools.
Yes, they do. I myself had studied graphic arts, and I did the type of printing that involved the use of weighted tools, as well as fine files to bevel and shape. And from that experience, I know it's so important to have just the specific type of tool, to have your own tool to carve the lines and shapes that you need. It's a very it really requires a fine touch. So much of it is to know the feel and surface. So
Lydia, it looks like John has his hand up. John, do you want to unmute?
yes, John.
Hi, Lydia. This is John Kaletsis from the Asian Art Museum. I actually studied in Japan and I did woodblock carving. And so these tools, although slightly different, we also had quite a box full of tools. So it reminds me of how many tools you need to be proficient.
Uh-huh.
And Ed shares in the chat, similar tools can be used by potters for shaping ceramics.
Yes. Did you make your own tools by any chance?
John?
Oh, no, I did not.
Well, it's you could see that in this instance, it was so important for the Netsuke master to make their own tools, and again to have those specific shapes and so forth. They're actually considered part of a treasure box, if you will, of their craft. But yes, these tools are wonderful, and I can't imagine making art without them. So regarding, let me see. So now let's get to our object here, our Netsuke. What is on screen is an identification slide showing a photo of the object and also giving some bullet point information. The name of the Netsuke we'll be looking at is called Octopus in Octopus Pot. It was created and signed by the Netsuke master Ohara Mitsushiro, spelled Mitsuhiro. His years were 1810 to 1875, and that puts him right in the middle towards the end of the shogunate rule in Edo period Japan. It is from the object is from the collection of the Asian Art Museum. And it had actually been a transfer from the Fine Arts Museum in San Francisco. So it was given to given to the Asian Art Museum to add to its collection. The next slide here is a close-up photo of a netsuke, our netsuke, in detail. It is about the slide itself is enormous, but the object is about the size of an average adult thumb, approximately 2 inches. It is made from wood from regional sources. It wasn't clear what type of wood was used in this. So because there were so many, so the regional sources will probably be trying to judge from where the netsuke master lived would be the best indicator of what type of wood he may have used. This netsuke is carved on all sides, so it's carved in the round and it's been hollowed out to a shape similar to that of a hanging bell. Its surface has been delicately textured and stained a deep brown to resemble a type of earthenware pot or fishing lure used by fishermen to capture octopus. If you were to hold this object in your hand, you might, as one of my fellow docents pointed out, feel the surface texture of this object reminds you of the skin of a ripe avocado. A vividly colored series of numbers are painted along the bottom shape rim. This is the number used by the museum to catalog objects in its collection. So if you see it, it's not part of what the artist put on the object. It's just it's a tool for the museum to keep track and to catalog this object. Getting back to the original netsuke, though, bits of inlaid glass and tiny barnacles, real barnacles, encrust the looped tip of the pot, as well as the open rim of the pot. And it's at the loop that the cord would go through in order to fasten, to use this in men's attire, to fasten the fitted boxes or in row. A thin ivory chip is inlaid near the tip of the netsuke, just under the loop. It is incised and contains black ink with the signature of the master, Mitsuhiro. The master, Mitsuhiro, lived during the waning years of Edo period Japan and the opening of commercial trade with the West. Traditional styles of dress became less and less popular as commercial interaction with the West increased. By the late 19th century, netsuke and inro evolved from practical everyday use with kimono to art collectors' items and souvenirs brought back from Japan by Western visitors. So we can see that during this transitional period, it was important to people to possess an object by a known master. It had significance during that transitional period, but then after, towards the end of the Edo period, became something more than that. Let's move to the next slide. So we're still holding the netsuke in our hand and turning it over. The slide shows the netsuke from the bottom looking in. Tiny barnacles and bits of glass are inlaid along the rim. If you could hold this netsuke in your hand, you might feel the presence of something in the hollow of the pot. If you could gently sound out the hollow, like making a sound, you might be able to detect the presence of something inside. The object is so small that it may not be possible for fingers to probe inside and feel out the intricate carving of a tiny octopus. This little octopus has a smooth, polished head, detailed carved eyes, and realistically detailed tentacles. The position of its head is directed toward the opening of the pot, and its delicate tentacles are reaching along the sides of the pot. This is a type of interior carving called anabori, spelled Anabori. That means cavern. So it's cavern paint carving. It speaks to the master's skill and patience in creating images not easily noticeable by the unaided human eye. The type of tools he might have used for such intricate carving would be a series of small, sharp-edged knives and magnifying or good quality glasses. So let's take a moment here. I wonder if anyone has any questions about this.
And if you have a question, you could unmute or,
I have a question.
yes.
What's the color of the wood? Is it aged and looking kind of black, or is it gray, or can you see grain apart from the carving? Can you see that in the
That's
Nitska?
it. Excellent question. And for that, I'm just going to move back one slide. And in this slide, this is the one where it has the inlay of the master's signature as well as the museum's number. But you spoke to the grain, and there is no grain visible. The surface has been totally worked over. It's been smoothed, and the goal of the carver was to simulate a ceramic object. So he left nothing there to suggest the grain of wood. It actually looks like it's made out of clay rather than wood. Having said that, there is what he did was he covered it with a stain, so it's a dark brown stain, and then rubbed the surface and reworked it so that aspects of the underside could be revealed, giving it the impression of a texture very similar to the skin of an avocado. I just think that's such a wonderful image. Thank you, my fellow docent, for suggesting that to me, because once I heard that, I could never think of it otherwise. So what you have here is you have patterns almost seemingly in a random sequence of dark and then light brown. With looking inside, the octopus itself is very smooth. The color again is a brown, but it's a very reddish, warm brown, almost like, I suppose, a mahogany brown. The carving itself, everything has been carefully carved and polished. So the tentacles and the underside of the octopus tentacles have a different color brown than the tentacles themselves. The barnacles and mica or pieces of glass that are inlaid are white. And the deep recess inside, it's very dark. It's difficult for me to actually describe that color, but it is mostly brown, different shades of brown.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. All right.
Jacqueline has her hand up. Jacqueline, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much for this tour. I just had a question specifically about the red that you mentioned, Lydia, about the sort of categorizing and the marking of the piece. I'm just wondering, is this common practice? Why have this sort of red on the piece as opposed to something else that identifies maybe like the box or the label or something, so that it's not touching the piece directly?
Well, that's a great question, and one that I would defer to Deb Clearwaters to answer.
Yeah, I was hoping someone would ask. It's not current practice. And, if you want to go back to that image, Lydia, I think at the time, I think first of all, this is removable, I think. I don't know why it hasn't been removed. Maybe it has been cleaned off, and I could ask our head of conservation if they're planning to clean off the numbers that were written onto objects. I think it was because they weren't clever enough to figure out how to tie a tag to this object. I don't know why they would actually paint directly on it, but the assumption at this time was that this was the back of the artwork. You'll see it on the undersides and in other instances, but it's certainly not present practice. And, but it is interesting that at one point this was thought to be a good idea by somebody.
Great, thank you.
And the number B70 indicates this was transferred from the Fine Arts Museums in 1970.
Thank you, Deb. Okay, moving on to the slide. The slide I'm looking at now is another view of the Netscape pot. It shows Japanese calligraphy in Sosho, spelled S-O-S-H-O, or running script style, covering the outside surface of the pot. The script is carefully carved with flowing single strokes cut through the stained surface, revealing lighter, warmer color of unstained wood. The depth of carving for this script is shallow, giving the overall impression of subtle movement, such as one might experience or would be experienced by the movement of water and sand on the ocean floor. The carving here is notable because it also indicates the importance of the tools, why it's so important to the master to have a specific tool. If one could hold this in their hands and gently feel the surface, you would be able to discern how each carving of the characters falls in a particular line. It's a very specific art, and incredible because of the miniature, diminutive size of the object itself. The next slide shows the continuation of calligraphy on the other side of the pot. The writing is a haiku by the 17th century poet Matsu Basho, spelled B-A-S-H-O. And his years were 1644 to 1694. Many of you may be familiar with haiku, but let me just say it's a short poem consisting of 17 syllables broken down into a 5-7-5 sequence in 3 lines. The structure of the haiku requires the poet to use language essential to the experience of time and place. These poetic expressions was a major theme of the haiku that Basho wrote during his time traveling through rural Japan. The haiku on this pot was written during an overnight visit that Basho made to the seaside town of Akashi, which is located near the city of Kobe in south central Japan. Akashi was the location of battles between historically warring feudal clans, referenced in the medieval literary epic Tale of the Heike. Basho, in his youth, had been in service with a samurai family. And let me see. And so one may wonder what feelings Basho had experienced while spending the night at this historical location. His poem, his haiku, in translation reads, "O octopus pot, a fleeting dream, the summer moon." The verse is based on his direct personal experience, a moment in time. "O octopus pot, a fleeting dream, the summer moon." There is some there are many translations of Basho's haiku, and some of them are quite interesting in how they vary. I chose another one just by comparison that was done by translated by a modern Zen poet. It reads, "Octopus jar, effervescent dreams, the summer moon." So going back to our octopus jar, let me move back a few slides. We're looking again at the visual of our octopus in the pot. And I'll read again the haiku. "O octopus pot, a fleeting dream, the summer moon." After hearing this haiku and considering what we know about this object and what we've been introduced to, what do you feel about the pot? And also, why do you think the artist chose to use Basho's poem?
Give everybody a minute to think about it. I mean, I'm connecting the moon imagery to the round shapes of this object. You know, the mouth of the vessel is round and the head of the octopus is round. And I wonder if there's a visual pun that the artist intended.
I don't know, but it's very possible.
What do other people think?
Can you repeat the haiku?
I didn't hear.
Can you repeat the haiku?
Yes,
Haiku, yeah.
yes, I can. Oh, octopus pot, a fleeting dream, the summer moon.
This is this is Victor. I think Deb appropriately nailed the moon image when you're looking into the pot, and the octopus body itself rather resembles or could resemble the moon. So I think there's a double reference there.
Definitely. There are so many subtle references, and the beauty of the haiku really, I think that the carver really really wanted his image to resonate with that haiku. I wondered, I'm interested if you all have any ideas why you think the carver would have chosen to put this haiku on this Netscape object.
This is Stan. I really don't have an idea, but I have more of a question. And
Sure.
that is, this decorative item, that I assume that they're different, that like men would wear different neckties, or at least they used to express some individual style or something. Is there something about that? I mean, were they different? Were they intended to send a message about status or style or some such thing back then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And each Netscape is quite different. Actually, in the Netscape case at the museum, they have on display about 130 different types of Netscape, each one of them individual. And some of them had different intentions. I chose this particular one because I like poetry, and I wondered why, what the meaning of this Netscape was and what the poetry was. So it definitely had a particular meaning to the person who commissioned it from the Netscape master. It
Irene,
certainly,
oh, go ahead.
yes.
I was just going to offer, Irene from the chat says, the octopus is fleeting in the ocean. Now you see it and now you don't. And he's also hiding in the, so there's this kind of reveal that happens when you tilt this Netscape to look inside. When at first glance, you have no inkling that there would be something inside. So it's kind of a nice little surprise, like when you drink out of a mug and there's a little carving or design at the bottom of the mug. So I
That's
wonder if that's
brilliant.
part of it too. Thank you.
Yes,
Irene.
absolutely. What a brilliant observation. As all the observations we've had so far, they're just wonderful. That is absolutely on point. So now I'm glad that you mentioned the tilting and the hidden part, because that brings us to something quite interesting, which Deb made me aware of. And that has to do with the placement of the calligraphic characters on the surface of the Netscape. In order for the characters to be properly read, we actually need to hold it in a different way. On screen now is a slide showing two side-by-side images of the octopus pot Netscape with the loop side up. The loop side down, which is the way that the calligraphy is written. It suggests that the calligraphy on the Netscape could only be read when removing it from the obi. So it was a very personal kind of experience for the person who used this Netscape as part of their clothing. They would hold it in their hand and look at it as they removed it and read the haiku, perhaps even look inside and see the little octopus. So there was an entire, it seems to indicate an entire involvement with this piece, with what is carved there, and also with the poetry and the artistic quality of the calligraphy, some kind of identification that the wearer would have. After all we've considered with the octopus pot Netscape, one cannot help but wonder what this Netscape meant to the person who commissioned it from Master Mitsushiro. So that brings us today to the end. That brings us to the end of today's virtual tour. We've talked about 3 objects, each created by the artist to express an essential experience within the backdrop of the natural world and the literary tradition of painting, calligraphy, and poetry. Yet, in each of these objects also served a function in a practical sense. The screens for dividing up rooms and creating spaces, the Netscape for fixing one's in-row or possessions to the sash. Yet, when the world changed, what was left behind was the essence of the object, the essence that we have kind of explored today in the tour. So thank you for your attention. It's been a privilege for me to be with you today, and I hope that you enjoyed the tour.